It was that one. I think I've done it. I think I've managed to launch it. I don't know. I haven't got a clue what's going on. Someone in the chat.
You don't teach IT, do you?
I don't teach IT. I can't even spell IT. I just like. I haven't got a clue what's gone on there. So without Creaky's got an important engagement tonight that he can't miss. So I'm going alone. Unmute. Right. Am I still muted now? I think I've unmuted. I guess we'll find out, guys, on the... Oh, we're live, yeah. All right, we're off. So I guess we'll find out on the way. So that's a smooth start, as usual. It's good. What do you think about... what do you think about that, Mark? Is that the professional professional start you were expecting?
Dude, this is my first go, so...
I'm sorry.
Tjump's the veteran here. Let's give him.
I don't know, it's about average for, I don't know, I think you're like at least 15 minutes earlier than modern day debate on average, so you're doing good.
Well, listen, I want to thank you guys for coming here, genuinely, because we've had this debate scheduled it was a few weeks ago, wasn't it, Mark, that we...
Yeah.
We got this... I think I said to you on the email, I definitely find someone to debate this, because it's one I've been wanting to watch for a long time. And if I knew more about it, I would debate it. But I was saying off air, all I've seen are like the extremities of both sides on social media. I haven't actually done, if you like, any research on it. So I've only got my prejudices from what I've seen on YouTube. So I'm really looking forward to hearing both sides of sort of the argument. Before we get into what the debate is on, etc., if I let you introduce yourself, Tjump, do you wanna go first? Just give yourself an introduction, not your speech, but just tell everyone who you are, where they can find you, and I've put your channel in the description.
I'm Tjump. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Tjump.
And he's very good. He's very good debater as well. I've seen him a few times, so looking forward to this. Mark, how about yourself?
Nothing to report, I'm afraid. Don't have a YouTube page. Don't have nothing you can look at, I'm afraid. Just, I am what I am.
And what have I done there? And the debate tonight is on Antifa. And starting first, we'll have our usual opening, 8 minutes or so, and then we'll go into the back and forth, and then we'll collect any questions from the chat we've got. But I'm hopefully just going to sit back and learn a lot here, because I know very little. So, Mark, you organised the debate, so feel free to go first. I'll kind of start a clock. I won't be too strict, but you've got 8 minutes to lay down what your side is, what your argument is, and start when you like, sir.
Okay, first off, just thanks for having us. Like I say, I'm a big fan of yourself and Creaky and yourself, Tjump. When I found out it was you, I was like, shit. I was hoping I was going to get an absolute arsehole that I could yell at. But I've seen a lot of your debates, and I'd 9 times out of 10 side with you. So I was quite surprised. Thankfully, this is more of an opinion one and not a fact one, because you would tear me to shreds. Right. So Antifa. Let me just pull up my notes here. 2 seconds. So first of all, I have to state from the off that Tjump, you've got a rather thankless task tonight, because I'm going to be very annoying. I'm going to be calling lots of no true Scotsmans and lots of straw men, not because of intellectual dishonesty, but because Antifa, by definition, is not an organization per se. It's not a member-driven group. There's no top-down hierarchy. There's no codes of conduct. There's no centralized mission statement. It's a loose coalition for many nations and cities, each with their own areas of focus and their own opponents and stuff. There isn't really an Antifa. It's an umbrella term that denotes a broad spectrum of groups and people, and it just means anti-fascist. Sometimes it means anti-fascist action. There's debates about that within Antifa. So there's no Antifa-headed letter paper. You can't donate to Antifa. There's no membership cards, and it's definitely not funded by George Soros, because there's no money. It's like a self-identified term, like being a feminist or anti-homophobe. So the various groups have different methods and strategies, and not all are defensible. And it's not my goal to claim that all Antifa are angels. And what it is an invaluable resource in the fight against fascism, and a reliable front line of people who are willing to risk the safety and the freedom to stand up to fascist bullies and to shut them down. So as long as there's been fascism, there have been anti-fascists. It's a reactionary thing. So to get into fascism a little bit, fascism is a political movement that stokes nationalism and racism and uses violence to bolster authoritarian rule. It's a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. Fascists believe that liberal democracy is obsolete and regard the complete mobilization of society under a totalitarian one-party state as necessary to prepare a nation for armed conflict and to respond effectively to economic difficulties. Such a state is led by a strong leader, such as a dictator or a martial government composed of members of the governing fascist party to forge national unity and maintain stable and orderly society. Nasty bastards. Fascism first appeared in Italy in the 1920s under Mussolini, who coined the term fascism after the Roman fasces, the symbols of power, the sticks and the bundle and the axe, who was the founder of the leader of Italy's National Fascist Party. He rose to power with the squadristi, stupid Italian thing, can't pronounce it, the black shirts who brutalized political opponents and silenced dissident voices, enabling Mussolini to dismantle Italian democratic institutions and appoint himself dictator. Even in the 1920s, though, before fascism came to power, there were still anti-fascist groups in Italy who, like today, understood that fascism is a completely different phenomenon on the political spectrum. Through fascism, authoritarian leaders co-opt religion, education, technology, and even leisure activities to control citizens and punish their opponents and critics. So Antifa, or anti-fascist action as it is, you can see the flag behind me there, that was formed by the KPD, the Communist Party of Germany, to oppose the fascist-leaning Nazis. And as the grip of fascism tightened across Europe, and opponents of fascism all across Europe started using this as their banner. And there were people with different ideas. It wasn't just the communists, that's just they're the ones that started this, I guess, because they were the ones most at threat at the time. There were people, many different ideas on how to fight fascism. You could argue that the coalition that defeated the Nazis and the fascist powers in World War II was an anti-fascist coalition. That the people realized that fascism stood against basic human rights and democracy, sometimes crudely, sometimes sophisticated. This first generation of anti-fascists realized that fascism is something different from ordinary right-wing politics, because fascism sought to build a mass base and it promised its supporters a revolutionary change in their own lives. It's able to win followers at a time of crisis among social layers that are otherwise the natural base of the left, including workers, the unemployed, and the young. As a result, even when fascists were relatively few, they were able to grow incredibly fast. I didn't start my timer. What am I on? Sorry.
You're fine. It's a pretty laid back, this one, debate. So just take as long as you need, unless we're not here for another 10 minutes, you know.
Cheers, guys. Fascism didn't die out, of course. At the end of World War II, the ideology had begun to take root all around the world. The fascist movements in America, Switzerland, France, Spain, to Argentina, Southern America. It's a transitional movement, and it's how it stayed alive. Neo-Nazis and anti-immigrant groups became active again in the 70s and 80s in Britain over here, especially with the National Front, Combat 18, turned into the BNP, among others. And again, footholds often linked to football hooligan firms. Eastern Europe and the US have renewed fascist activity, and the anti-fascist activity follows that. A lot of that came from the music scene, the skinhead punks, and then the Antifa punks, and those were the running battles of the time, and that's when a lot of the symbols and the icons of both sides have become popularized. In the 80s, people who opposed fascism in Europe, in the punk rock communities especially, started referring to themselves as the Antifa. Again, it's a poorly understood term generally. It's not an organization, it's not a movement. Though protesters of fascism worldwide rally behind the flag and the banners, there are generally the left, but there are also many in the center. There's some conservatives even, but they all realize what fascism meant. And that's the destruction of democracy from within and the creation of a dictatorship. Many anti-fascists shun violence, but some states the struggle against fascism may require violent acts, because fascism in itself is intrinsically a violent movement. The argument is that militant anti-fascism is inherently self-defense because of the historically documented violence that fascists pose, especially to marginalized people. Seen in this light, fascism's violent ideology makes any violent action taken against it an act of self-defense. In America, Antifa has become Antifa, of course, and it's frequently used to conjure up a picture of black-clad activists, far-left radical violent extremists, and even when Antifa activists oppose groups who publicly espouse violence, white supremacists and neo-Nazis, it's come about again recently because for a long time, the US far right was restricted to, George Lincoln Rockwell and the Nazi Party, and anti-fascism is only as popular as fascism generally, which is they're entwined. They are, but anyway, I'll get into that. If you want to know why more Americans today consider themselves anti-fascist, you don't have to go much further than Trump. The most powerful politician in the world responds to chants of Jews will not replace us by praising the very fine people. Then these aren't normal times. And if you have a look at the Holocaust Museum, Signs of Fascism, Trump's hit almost all 12 of those. We can go through those. I don't want to waste time running through those. So more recently, anti-fascists counter-protested in the US at rallies staged by far-right extremists and white nationalists across the country. It's grown in response to prominent political figures openly embracing key elements of fascism, racism, dictatorship, and the use of political violence. So anti-fascist activists back in the 30s might not have been able to predict the eventual outcome of fascism's rise, but for today, anti-fascist grim legacy of terror, imprisonment, and mass murder stands as a warning. We know how this movie ends, is a quote here from someone whose name I can't see. When you have people in the street waving swastikas up, boasting that they're white nationalists, it ends with people being killed. And so the Antifa argument is that ignorance is no excuse here. We need to do everything we can to prevent these people from coming to power. Sorry, I'm going to skip that because it's not useful. In Europe, where Antifa has much more storied and diverse history due to the many different nations and ancient squabbles, the rise of the right has been met by the anti-fascists in their respective areas, and actions are constantly underway against the Freedom Party of Austria, the New Flemish Alliance in Belgium, Golden Dawn in Greece, Liga Nord in Italy, Our Slovakia, Alternative for Germany, and many others. Here in the UK, we've got the EDL, the National Front, the FLA, and it might seem that Antifa is merely some unruly kids in black hoodies chucking bricks at the police, but that's all the media wants to show you, and we know why they want to show you that, because they thrive on making easily identifiable boogeymen that they can point out and say, well, that's not us. But the anti-fascists are the ones willing to stand on the front lines and say no more. They're the first line of defense against racists and fascists. The roots of fascism and anti-fascism are entwined, but to say that one feeds the other is backwards. If fascism went away, there'd be no more anti-fascists. But if the anti-fascists went away, the fascists wouldn't. The fascist views and propaganda will be easily spread and become seen as acceptable by the general populace and shift their dialogue to the right. Anti-fascism has no unified political aims other than the opposition of fascism. It seeks no office and has no demands. It makes no money and needs none. It's here simply because fascism here. No fascism, no Antifa. It's a reactionary group and has no proactive stance. Fascism grows like a weed in the underbelly of society, and it can be spread through fear and lies, demonizations, and the promise of salvation. It's vile and racist. It hates freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom of religion, and all those who oppose it. We have seen what happens when fascism grips a nation, the destruction of democracy and the millions and millions of dead, the absolute worst of humanity. Antifa, among other anti-fascists, are committed to stamping it out wherever it appears, never again. And that's it, thanks. So I'm just trying to defend my laptop from my cat.
Right, thank you very, very much for that. I can already see in the chat this is getting quite a lively chat, and I've put a link to the community page just there, I think, where you can leave some questions to ask Mark and Tjump later on. I just want to say two things very quickly before I pass over to Tjump. First one is thank you, Crafty Keeler, for the super chat wishing Creaky a happy birthday. I'll make sure he gets that. And the second one is Rapid X, you're in the chat. Can you hit me up on Twitter, mate? I've been trying to get in touch with you and I just can't seem to track you down. So if you hit us on Twitter, drop us a private message or something, and I'll get back in touch with you. Other than that, Tjump, I know you've brought some things you want to share, and you're going to test my technical abilities, whether I can get them on screen or not. So your time starts now, sir.
All right. So the debate is Antifa, positive or negative, good or no, bad, whatever. My position is that Antifa is not really an organization, so you can't really say it's as a whole good or bad, but you can talk about its practices. There are common practices that Antifa has around the world, and you can assess whether those practices are good or bad. For example, the practices of all wearing black and blockading the police so they can't arrest the people in the organization. That, I think, is a very dangerous policy, because even though the entire organization may not be pro-violence, those who are pro-violence in the organization are going to be protected by those kinds of practices. So if there is a great deal of violence in Antifa, like beating up reporters, hurting people, attacking, punching Nazis, those people will not be held accountable for their actions. And so the organization is tacitly in supporting the violence of the people in the organization, which I think is a bad policy. I think it's immoral to do that. I think we should definitely hold people accountable for the violence that they impose. And so if someone in the organization does hurt someone, we should not protect them from the police. They should be arrested. And so the fact that Antifa employs these tactics in order to protect their members from the police, I think is immoral. Just like I would say the same thing about the right-wing supporters. If they were protecting their members who did harm, that would be just as bad. So the main problem I have with Antifa is their tactics of not holding their members accountable who are violent, for specifically the reason my opponent mentioned in the debate opener, that they see any action taken against fascism as self-defense. Like, obviously that's wrong. You can't just say he's a Nazi, therefore it's okay for me to punch him in the face. He could be an old guy, he's never going to take power, he's never going to hurt anybody. Just because he has an opinion does not mean it's okay for you to punch him in the face. One of the main problems with Antifa is this dogmatic ideology that you can just hurt anyone who is a Nazi because they have a different opinion than you, because you interpret their opinion as being a threat. That's not how it works. There's no such thing as thought crime or word crime. Unless they are actively threatening your life with a gun or trying to hurt you, then you have no justification to harm them just because of their opinion. And saying that because lots of fascists committed crimes in the past and the fascist governments killed lots of people, that doesn't, you can't impose that onto just anyone who accepts fascism or promotes fascism. Just like you can't say Christianity murdered millions of people, therefore all Christians, it's okay to punch them in the face because Christianity is obviously a violent religion. Obviously that's not the case. It's the same thing as saying, oh, well, lots of African Americans committed lots of crimes, therefore it's okay to lock up any African American. Clearly not. You can't make a generalization about everyone in the group just because of some amount of people in the group create violence or do something disproportionately. It's just a generalization fallacy. You cannot do that. And it's wrong to judge people by their color of their skin for the exact same reason. You can't generalize because of some people in a group may be bad and apply that to the entire group. It's composition division fallacy. My main argument against Antifa is presented by the news, by all people, CNN. And here is my video that's showing, essentially explaining my position in more detail.
So I muted the Tjump. What was it you wanted to bring it up?
The video is the first one, like in the Twitter. I put them in order so you can just put them up one at a time.
Right. So you're testing my technology now. So you want the video, which, so if I click this, right, I should get that. Mark, sorry, I know I said over email we can't screen share. So there is a news feed, but you're gonna have you got a separate watch page open so you can see what Tjump's?
Or could you could send him the link in the chat and he can open it there and watch it.
Is that going to be at sync though?
Might be, but if I send you the link...
Can I hear it? If I can hear it, I'll be able to hear it, all right?
No.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm going to send you this link, mate. So you've got it. It's in the chat. If you just click on the Zoom chat and take it from there, you can watch it while the crowd watch it. Okay, so if I do this, boom, I should now be able to press play and everyone should hear it. That's the plan. Okay, here we go.
That is the plan.
Counts almost all of the people protesting against. Welcome back to the lead, the national lead now. By most accounts, almost all of the people protesting against the hateful bigots, the Nazis and Klansmen in Charlottesville, were peaceful, but not all of them. In their midst was a sometimes very violent group of protesters that call themselves Antifa, known to not only clash with bigots, but also sometimes with police and occasionally storefronts. At least 2 journalists in Virginia were assaulted by violent counter-protesters over the weekend, including this cameraman from the Richmond CBS affiliate. CNN's Sarah Ganim now takes us inside Antifa and shows us this group like you've never seen it before.
It's 6 a.m. in Portland, Oregon, and we're headed to a bar with blacked-out windows.
They wanted to meet us really early in the morning because they're concerned about a lot of people being around.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage, hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting.
You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way, and you have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
There's no firm number on how many Antifa activists there are in the U.S. because there isn't any one organization. Most are local groups that recruit and communicate through social media. But experts who track these organizations say their membership is growing in response to the rise of white national groups and the election of President Donald Trump. Violence and property destruction led to more than 200 arrests in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. Prosecutors say they were wearing masks covered head to toe in black, a tactic the Antifa call black bloc.
People dress in black bloc for a few things. One,
Scott Crow has been leading anarchist and militant leftist groups for decades.
so people put on the masks so that we can all become anonymous. And then therefore we are able to move more freely and do what we need to do, whether it is illegal or not.
So some people will push back on that and say that the black bloc is to keep people from being identified and arrested when they break the law, when they commit crimes.
Damn right. It's a good way to avoid the ramifications of law enforcement.
We saw that firsthand at a May Day protest in New York City.
We cover our face because the Nazis will try to find out who we are. And that is a very bad thing because they harass people. When they organize, they kill people, they hurt people, they fight people. And we're the ones who are fighting back. They are the second coming of Hitler.
Police in Berkeley told us they haven't seen this kind of destruction since the 1960s. Law enforcement in other cities are dealing with similar situations, like in Portland, Oregon, where Antifa have been involved in at least 10 protests ending in violence, according to police. And it's wearing on the community.
It is new. It's like this rumble mentality of, I'm going to bring my friends, you bring your friends, and we're going to fight it out in the park. It's not something we've seen here. It's not good for the city. People are just frustrated by it. It's affecting their livability. It's affecting their business.
Has it become more violent?
It happens quicker. The fire starting that we saw on May Day is something we haven't really seen much of in the past. The running through the street, breaking windows and everything in sight. We haven't seen it as consistently as we've seen it in the last 8 months.
But it's the violence that's gotten them attention, directly confronting groups that preach white nationalist rhetoric, like on Inauguration Day, when white nationalist Richard Spencer was punched in the face. And it was the Antifa movement that caused Berkeley to cancel speeches by extreme right provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos.
If there are the more hardcore elements, the white supremacists and neo-Nazis that go to these rallies that are itching for a fight, we're there to say, we'll stand in your way.
The thing is, Jake, that experts who I've talked to say that the Antifa violence may end up actually hurting their cause. Across the country, people who are dressing in black bloc are getting arrested. Authorities are taking this seriously, but that's not stopping them at all. They have been telling me that they believe that this tactic is working. Now, one of the interesting things that I found in doing this reporting, what's really surprised me, is that we found that a lot of these new Antifa members, they're young people, disenfranchised young people who felt that they were let down by both parties after the election, and this is where they ended up. Jake?
You're muted.
And I was saying such intelligent stuff as well. That's ended on our bit. Were there any of the other images you wanted to go through or anything, or is that up for now?
Yeah, those just so based on the video, like obviously we can see Antifa is clearly a violent movement, and they justify it by saying that, well, just all fascism is evil, and so it's okay to punch fascists. And that's just not the case. And we can see that they defend many kinds of violent protesters. Like you can show the next image, which is one of where a professor from, I think, Berkeley actually was convicted of assault because he hit someone in the head with a bike lock, which is just another example of the fact that many people in Antifa use the black bloc kind of strategy in order to get away with violence against fascists. And the fact that Antifa promotes violence against fascists by supporting principles like saying any action taken against fascism is self-defense, I think that's a horribly immoral principle. Like, clearly you can't just justify all fascism, and fascism isn't inherently bad. It may be bad in many cases, in most cases, especially in Western society, but it isn't inherently bad, because fascism is just the authoritarian movement characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opinion, and strong regimentation of societal and economical practices. But those can be justified in the case of somewhere like if you're taking over from Hitler or Stalin after a military defeat, then you enforce fascism. You are taking over the government. You are opposing the opposition. You have strong regimentation over the societal, economical things going on, like what America and the other allied nations did after World War II. They took over the economies and then implemented something after them. Like, doing the fascist government indefinitely is obviously bad, but it can be useful in certain instances in order to transition from really bad governments into something less bad. So fascism isn't always wrong, but it's the everything in moderation. It can be useful in certain instances, like after war, but it shouldn't be implemented as like a wholesale economic standard forever, indefinitely. It should have specific purposes. So this idea that any action taken against fascism is self-defense is clearly wrong. Not all fascism is wrong, and it can be justified in certain cases. And it's not okay to just punch people in the street because they have a different ideology than you. You could show the next picture is like, here are people who are harming people very violently and using the Antifa protest as a way to get away with that. These are the same people who are similar people to who busted up Andy No's face for no reason while he was just recording the Antifa protest. And we can see this is we can even see this causing violence in Canada. Like, if you show the last image, this was essentially as violent as Canada gets, but they are blocking the way of an old lady. Like, who does this? Like, even Canadians are made violent by this vicious protest of this vicious ideology of Antifa. They like make Canadians do weird things that normally Canadians wouldn't do, like stopping old ladies in the street. Who does that? Even in Canada, it's crazy. So to conclude, I don't support Antifa because I don't support the practices of the movement. Even though they may not be an organized movement, they do have organized practices, such as the Black Bloc, such as barricading off police. And this didn't just start with after Trump. Like, the Trump administration labeled them a terrorist organization, but that all wasn't something that started with Trump. Like, even in 2016, when Trump was starting to like run for president during the Obama administration, the authorities believed that the anarchist extremists were primarily instigators of public violence at rallies. And after President Donald Trump's election, before he was elected, the Obama administration started to warn the authorities and people at these protests that they were becoming more violent, and the anarchist extremists were the instigators, and to be watch out for them. So this was something that even the Obama administration was recognizing, that Antifa was violent and being more violent and causing more violence. So it's not just Trump. I mean, obviously Trump calling them a terrorist organization I don't think is fair, but they are increasingly violent and they do account for a lot of the violence, and that is not something that I support. So I will conclude there.
Right. Well, you both certainly laid out your sides really thoroughly, which is great. We'll go pretty much straight into the back and forth now for maybe about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I've posted a link in the chat, and I'll keep doing so, to the community poll where you can put questions that we can ask Mark and Tjump after that sort of 40, 45 minute back and forth. We do just very quickly have a super chat that I want to read out for you, Tjump. I've got a feeling it's from a friend of yours, Stephen Steen, who says he once drove you home after a long date. Where you went to dinner, drinks, went to a tattoo parlor, and took in a live show. #true story. So yeah,
yep, it was a date with me, Modern Day Debate, and Stephen Steen. We had a 3-way orgy. It's all posted, full video chats on Modern Day Debate's OnlyFans. You can get it for a small donation of like $5,000.
It's great. Oh, and Jim Broughton says happy birthday, Creaky, and himself. So happy birthday to you then, Jim, and thank you very much for that. So I will not interrupt. You know, you guys both come across as extremely civil peoples, and I'm sure that this will be really educational for me. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to pass it back to you, Mark. You start the back and forth where you want, and just remember, all we ask is that we don't overtalk each other. You know, or you know, and because we've had our long intro, maybe if we keep our responses down to about a minute and a half, then the conversation go back and forth. So over to you, sir.
What was that PayPal for that video again, Tom? Goddamn cat's tail. Sorry, it's getting all up in our business.
Links to all my in every one of my videos.
Yeah, there was a few things you brought up there, Tom, that I was a little surprised that a CNN op piece about telling Antifa what Antifa is doesn't. I don't know. That's a massive.
Well, they just went to Antifa and asked them.
Well, sort of, but that was obviously what the girl said. Yeah, I stand behind. That's fair enough. But show it to make a false equivalency between Antifa and the fascists. That's not. Antifa don't turn up and start violence. Like Antifa's there to counter to make sure that, like she said, that if they go there looking for a fight, we'll take the fight is the thing, not. And a picture of an old lady who can't cross the road, you can't compare that with Auschwitz. Come on.
That was just a joke to say the Canadians were violent. That's Canadian violence. So
to be fair, the Canadian Antifa are the friendliest.
Exactly. So I didn't make a comparison to Antifa, and they definitely do. It's objectively demonstrated they do cause violence, and many of the people do go there to cause violence who are in Antifa. That was the report that I read from the Obama administration from 2016 saying that they do this. The Trump administration says it too, but they're not really trustworthy. But the Obama administration I do find relatively trustworthy, and the CNN reporting I find relatively trustworthy as well. So there are many cases of Antifa people who do cause violence and go there to cause violence. I don't really know if you can say the organization does, but because the organization has practices like the Black Bloc and like partitioning off police so they can't arrest the people, it condones the action of those who are violent because it protects them from being arrested, even though they deserve to be arrested. Like even in the video where we saw the video of Andy No getting assaulted by Antifa, there are many Antifa members who like try to get in between them and stop the violence, and they're perfectly admirable people. So this is obviously isn't everyone in Antifa, but there are people in Antifa who do go there to cause violence. Like Andy No wasn't doing anything when he was assaulted. He was just recording the Antifa movement, and people assaulted him, and his face got busted up all the time.
Again, you know what they stand for.
What?
You know what they stand for, these people. They're racist, vile. They don't want freedom of speech for anyone. They're horrible people. Get them punched, I say. Get them punched.
I know that's I think that's immoral. So just
it's not immoral. They're immoral. They're immoral from the out.
So what I would see it as is that there is no such thing as thought crime or opinion crime. So you can't. It's not immoral to have a thought, no matter what the thought is, or an opinion, no matter what the opinion is. It's only immoral once you use that opinion.
Is a racist opinion immoral?
No, there's no immoral opinions.
Okay.
So I see immorality as any involuntary imposition of will. So for something to be immoral, you have to restrict or harm someone else's will for it to be immoral. It means no thoughts could ever be immoral, and no opinions could ever be immoral because they don't ever restrict someone else's will. Which means if you're punching someone in the face, that would be a restriction of will unless they actually wanted it. So that would be immoral. So punching a Nazi in the face is more immoral than the Nazi hating certain groups of people, for sure.
I thought you were going to strawman it, and you're actually not, which is refreshing. But I just completely disagree. I say anyone who stands up, puts themselves on a platform to say things like that, racist things, homophobic things, anything like that, they put themselves up there. They have freedom of speech, but they don't have freedom from the consequence of their speech. And that's Antifa's job.
I think that's called vigilante justice, and I think we do have laws against that.
Sure, call it vigilante justice then. I still think anytime these ideas get a foothold or they become normalized, it's a slippery slope and everything shifts to the right. And there's no defense for that outlook. Enslavement and suppression of freedoms and suppression of like they don't want. You can't hide behind free speech when they're the first ones who'll get rid of it.
Right. So I'm not hiding behind free speech, but you can't punch just average Joe in the face. It's not his fault. Like if you punch Donald Trump in the face or you try to usurp a government and try to like do a revolution against an authoritarian government, perfectly reasonable. I can understand that. But you can't just punch some random fascist in the face, some old guy who's just
He wasn't an
from
old guy,
Texas
though, was
or
he?
whatever. What?
He wasn't an old guy, was he?
Which guy?
The guy
I'm
we
just-
just showed getting punched. I'd love to see that again. By
Andy
the way.
No? Oh yeah, no, he wasn't an old guy. I was just using a random example. Like Andy No is just a nobody YouTuber who has ridiculous opinions. Like you can't punch him in the face either. He's a random YouTuber guy.
I still maintain that they deserve. Right, you can come at them with words, and if you can't beat them with words, you have to stamp it out.
So you think that anyone who believes in fascism is necessarily going to lead to killing people or something?
Fascism leads to death. Yes.
So could there be a minority of people who are fascist in the government and they never take the government over and never cause a rise and they just a bunch of extremists who are in their little bubble and never cause any damage?
In theory. Yeah, I don't see.
Do you think there are lots of fascist people all over the world who just don't express their opinions or just hang out and tell with their friends but never actually do anything? Do you think those people exist?
That's where we want them. So hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not okay to punch those people in the face, is it? Because they're not actually doing anything. They're not going to cause anything. They just have their own opinions and live their own
We're
lives.
not talking about those people then, are we?
Actually, that's exactly what we're
No,
talking
we're talking about
Those-
people who
that's the most
turn
of
up
the
with
people.
tiki torches and stand there spouting hate. Those are the people we're talking about.
Like Andy No wasn't spouting hate. He was just recording.
Come on. What's his job?
He's a YouTuber?
His
I
job
think.
is hate. That is his job.
Again, you can't say expressing an opinion is hate. That's not how it works.
When he's expressing hate, it is extreme nationalism, anti-immigration stuff, anti-refugee stuff. It's pure hate.
Well, that's not hate. You can have those for economic reasons too. So, but again, expressing hate isn't something that justifies violence. Like that's the main problem here. The fact that you think it's okay to punch someone because they have a different opinion is just horribly immoral. Like that's literally no different than a Nazi thinking it's okay to punch someone because they have a different opinion because
It's
they're a
not
Jew.
though,
or
because you got to
something.
look at what the opinions are.
Can I just step in just to clarify something? And I'm not trying to take either side here. It's just I want to clarify a difference. A couple of times I've heard you talk about having a different opinion and then expressing a different opinion. So, question for you, Mark: would the action Antifa take be different for someone who just has an opinion, just has a particular opinion, as opposed to someone who's vocalizing that opinion on a public level, or are they the same? Would you put them in the same category? And I'll duck out now.
Again, I don't speak for Antifa, but words is always the first thing. It's counteracting leaflet drops and things like that. For example, you might have seen here, Catz. I mean, you'll recognize that Leeds United badge.
Yeah.
Right? So in the 80s, used to have the National Front fascist organization down Ellen Road handing out leaflets. And it was getting a foothold. The service crew in Leeds was strongly fascist. They were assholes. And it took the SWP, the Socialist Workers' Party, and the football club itself with CESPOD, and it took a lot of anti-fascist people of Leeds to come down to the grounds and say, look, these assholes, they're not from here. They're not part of your community. They're fostering hate. And you're falling for it. Then you hand out other leaflets. You just be there as a presence. That's how it should be done. But when they want to get violent, then that's where Antifa steps up as well. Like it's not we're not waving flowers and stick, that's not what Antifa's about. If they start a fight, there'll be a fight.
So did Andy No start the fight?
That's a good question.
Well, we have recording. We saw him. He's like, it's all recorded. So the answer is no.
Well, okay, fair enough. I guess he didn't start a fight there, no. But again, he's not someone he's not an innocent person in this. He's not out there. Do you know what I mean? Like he's preaching a violent philosophy, a violent ideology, and we know where it leads. We've seen it. And to appease them and just say, well, no, that's just another opinion and he's entitled to that. That's not how these things, we can't normalize fascism. And I'm shocked that that's what you're advocating. I heard you say there's good fascism and fascism. No, there isn't. When is it? That's abhorrent to me, and I can't get my head around that. Do you want to tell me about that again?
Yeah, like I said, fascism is just forcible suppression of opinion, economical controls, and dictatorship kind of thing. And so that can be implemented like after you take over a government. So, for example, after a regime like in World War II was taken over by other governments, they usually had dictatorial fascism. Started off that way, and then they use that to implement other policies. That's usually what happens in a government. You start with fascism, somebody takes control, and then they implement new things. So fascism used as a way to transition from one really bad government to another one is perfectly fine. That's usually what you need to do to get from one government to another one.
Is that not the dismantling of fascism, though?
Yes, you need to use fascism to dismantle.
So why dismantle it?
Because you don't want it to be in like abstention. You don't want to have continued fascism.
Well, why not?
Forever.
Why can't you have good fascism forever?
Because it's like everything. You want everything in moderation. You can't just have all the cocaine you want. Obviously, that's bad. Or all the marijuana you want. Obviously, that's bad. You want to have everything in moderation.
So you're saying we need a little bit of fascism?
Right. It can be good in certain instances. That's perfectly fine. So like,
but the fascists don't have a little bit of fascism. They don't want a little bit of fascism, do they? That's no good for them.
Are you speaking for all fascists, or because I'm pretty sure most of them?
It's written into their ideology.
Oh, what? Where is that written in?
It's total. It's authoritarian. It's totalitarian. It's control. It's you said it yourself.
Yes, it doesn't need forever though. Like you can have totalitarian for some time in order to implement some policy, which is usually what pretty much every fascist wants.
That's
they say
immoral.
We want fascism to do this one thing.
That's immoral.
What is?
Taking complete control of a populace to impose something you want is immoral.
Well, I mean, I would agree but there's definitely cases where it's justified, like removing certain people from power. Like it can be justified to take full authoritarian power, to remove certain people that are ruining the government, like Gaddafi, or what I would maybe the U.S. Senate or whatever, because they're terrible too. And so taking authoritarian power or dictatorial power for like a brief period of time in order to restructure the government, then giving it up, I think is perfectly fine. I don't see anything that's horribly immoral with that. It's only immoral if you like try to institute it forever. Like obviously that's bad, but I wouldn't say all fascism
is hardcore nationalism. You know, in group, out group, no immigration, no rights for women, or no rights for anyone, no dissent whatsoever. Like, how is that moral, even if it's for 10 minutes?
Well, again, so I think any imposition of will is immoral. So I think like even killing someone in self-defense is technically an immoral action. So I would grant it is immoral, but it's justified. Like you do one bad thing to prevent a greater bad thing. So like what you're trying to do with Antifa is you're forcibly suppressing them with violence. When you punch them, you're doing exactly the thing you're saying. How is that moral?
Because we're doing it on the side of freedom, and do you know what I mean? Like that's a very reductionist way to say it. And
so fascism is okay if it's on the side of freedom in order to institute freedom.
It's about fascism's never on the side of freedom.
Well,
like by definition.
Well, you just said you're using fascist tactics by forcibly suppressing the opposition.
It's not a fascist tactic. How is it a fascist tactic?
To forcibly suppress the opposition? That's literally what in the definition.
But this is similar to the freedom of speech thing. You can't argue that and then be the first ones to take it away. Like that's what we're defending.
What? Not following your argument.
We're defending the right to be opposition because they would take it away.
So fascism is okay. It's okay to punch someone in the face and forcibly suppress the opposition when you're doing it to promote something good, like freedom of speech.
Are you suggesting it's not? We shouldn't have fought World War II then?
No, that's my argument. Is that it's okay to do fascism sometimes. I'm saying yes, I agree. It is okay to do fascism sometimes.
That's not fascism. Fascism is a whole thing. There's a reason it's called fascism. We know what fascism is, and we have to stop it. And if I understand what you're saying, that like that's suppression of the opposition, and to a degree, I suppose it is, but that's to stop that. They would stop all opposition. That's the first thing they would do.
Well, remember,
with the power of the state.
Is that sometimes it's okay to use fascism in order to stop something worse.
But I don't think you can call that.
Well,
That's
just-
not the
that's
fascism.
just
Is
one
bigger than
example.
that. Okay, fair enough.
That's just one example. So you could use full-blown entire fascism in order to stop something worse. Like you could say, I'm going to take a dictatorial control over the United States or whatever to evict the terrible Congress and Senate we have because they're ruining the country, and then elect new people. Like, and I don't really care if I'm going to oppress the opinions of anyone who disagrees, because we need this done in order to fix America. Like, that could be justified if, I don't really know if it would be or not, but it could be justified if Congress and the Senate were really that bad. Then using full-blown fascism in that case could be justified, just like using forcible suppression of opinion you think is justified in the case of Antifa. Just because it's defined as fascism doesn't mean it's inherently bad. There are definitely lots of cases of it being bad, and it definitely power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, for sure. And so there's many risks to it. But fascism isn't inherently bad. It's only a tool that should only justifiably be used in very, very stringently selective cases. But you can't just say you're a fascist, therefore you're bad. Because I just advocated for fascism.
I disagree. I disagree with your terms there as well. I think fascism is by definition bad, if we want to go like that.
Well, use my example. So I said I would be a fascist in the fact that I want to institute fascism for a few months to get rid of the garbage Senate and House of Republicans in America. Like, is that me being evil?
It's such a weird analogy. Like, how you, that sounds more like a revolution than fascism.
Well, yeah, I want to revolutionize and become the fascist. Yes, I am a fascist. I'm advocating for
but why would
fascism
you? But you're saying that fascism is the tool you use to get rid of the House.
Well, the tool would be the revolution, but it would then institute a fascist government, because I would be the authoritarian lead. I would oppose the suppression, and I would use force to remove the opposition. So I would be a fascist after the revolution, but it isn't.
Would you be?
So I'm advocating for
would you be
fascism.
strongly nationalistic? Would you be against democracy and trade unions and freedom of dissent and accountability of politicians and employees of the state and stuff like that?
I would reinstitute a new government. So I think fascism just says,
it sounds more like you'd be an authoritarian, not a fascist.
Well, fascism is dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opinion, strong regimentation of societal and economy. Those are the three criteria. I just Googled what is fascism. So I would use my dictatorial power, and then I do things about societal and economic control, like removing the Senate and the House and setting up my preferred economic system. And so I'd forcibly suppress opinion. So I'd do all of those things. I would fit the definition of fascism that I just Googled.
Okay, but fascism's more than 3 lines that you Google.
I just Googled the definition of fascism. And it
is a notoriously slippery definition, but that's absurdly reductive, I'd say.
Okay, do you want to list your whatever you said there were like 8 or 12 properties of fascism or something?
Okay, powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights.
Slower.
Powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights. Oh, sorry, you're typing these.
Yeah.
Okay, you can Google these real quick. Like they show up real quick.
What are they called?
If you put in 12 signs of fascism.
12 signs of fascism.
There's like a real famous sign from the Holocaust Museum.
Yep, I've heard of it. I don't remember them off the top of my head though.
Yeah.
All right, and you want to just read them off?
Yeah, okay. So disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government entwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, and rampant cronyism and corruption.
It also says fraudulent elections and supremacy of the military. 12.
You are right. Sorry, you're right. I missed 2 off.
So powerful and continuing nationalism. Yeah, I mean, I'd be supporting for America first. Get rid of these stupid senators because they're dumb. They're ruining America. Disdain for human rights. Yeah,
I thought you were going to say something else before you said senators. I was like, wow, he's really going for it.
Yeah, disdain for human rights. So definitely, I'm taking over by force authoritarianism and removing them from office without their opinions or votes. So yep, disdain for human rights. Identification of enemies, they're the enemy. Senate and the House, they're garbage, they're the enemy. We need to remove them. Supremacy of the military, absolutely, we need to militarily use those and crush them. I don't think I'd fit sexism as much. Controlled mass media, definitely. Controlled mass media, like we need to get rid of these dumbasses. And unifying of the enemy, like these are the enemy, use them to unify against these people. Obsession with national security, definitely, because I think they're a violation of national security. I wouldn't go for the religion and government one because I'm an atheist. Corporate power protected. I mean, yeah, definitely. I'm doing it for economic reasons. Labor power suppressed. Don't know if I'd fit that one. Probably not a disdain for intellectuals. And obsession with crime and punishment. Yes, I think they're all criminals. And what's his name? The turtle-looking guy needs to be locked up. Same with Trump. Rampant cronyism and corruption. Don't know about that one. Have to get in power and see if it corrupts me first.
See what offers you get. Yeah.
Definitely, I'd get rid of elections for sure because I'd be the dictator. So
okay, but you don't see here that. But then you're now the violence.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to use the violence to remove the dumbasses in the Senate and the House for my personal gain. I am advocating for fascism. Why am I immoral?
Because all of those things are immoral.
Well, I'm saying that the Senate and the Congress are so bad they justify using these evil things. I think that's perfectly
No, but you've got rid of
reasonable.
them. They're gone already, haven't you? That was the revolution.
Oh yeah,
This is
so
what you're
I'm
doing
going
now.
to for sure. So I'm saying I'm going to take over and use my fascism now for a brief time to fix all of these things, and then I'll give it up. But right now, I'm doing fascism.
Well, then you're immoral too. Then that's the violence.
It's violent for me to remove someone terrible from power and implementing myself to try and fix it.
You're going to fix it with powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, obsession with national security, corporate power protected, suppressing the labor movements.
Well, I wouldn't, not that one. But so most of these, yes, most of these I would use for a temporary amount of time to fix the current things, for sure. So like, in order to fix something that's broken, you got to break it. Like, I forget what the term is, like the gears one.
I don't understand why you need, I still don't understand why you need fascism after the revolution.
Well, and so I'm saying you don't necessarily need it, but it can be used. It's a tool that can be used to fix certain problems.
Okay, and I would say then you're going to end up in the same shit pile. You're already the same shit pile if you've gone straight back to that.
Again,
you may as well have not replaced them.
Where is the issue in what I just said? So I said I'm using fascism to get rid of the terrible government we have and institute a better one. So
It's
I'm
not
using
a better
fascism
one.
in a good
It's
way.
immediately not a better one.
Right. So I'm saying I'd use fascism, get rid of the bad one, and then I'd stop being fascist later.
Okay, well then
fascism.
I'd use communism.
Okay.
My point is, that's not a solution. That's not a solution.
It's a kind of a solution. Like I don't see what.
Okay, wait, if you think fascism's a tool in a toolbox that you can use like that, then that's immoral as well.
How so?
Because you can't suppress people like that. People have rights, innate rights, and if you're taking them away, who are you to take them away? That's immoral.
Right, I agree with you. That's what I said earlier. It's immoral, but it can be justified if it's less than the consequences, or less than if you didn't do it. So you can use one evil thing, like killing someone, to save 10 other people, and then the killing someone becomes a justified good thing to do. So fascism, even though it's bad, can be used to remove a worse government, and then it becomes a justified action.
What's the worst government than a fascist government?
It used to be a more fascist government.
Fair enough.
So use that example. So we use fascism to remove an even worse fascist government. Would that fascism be bad?
Well, then you're dismantling fascism. So
with fascism.
But I don't know if you can fight fascism with fascism.
What about my example didn't work? I'm going to become a fascist government for, let's say, a year to remove Russia, what's his name? Vladimir Putin from power.
Okay, then what?
Then I'll move it over to something else, to not fascism, to democracy.
It's such a of all the ways I thought this debate would go, I didn't think we'd be discussing that.
Would that be immoral? Is that plan immoral?
I think during the time you're being a fascist government yourself, then yes, that's immoral. Yeah.
But would you say we shouldn't do it? Like, should I not free Russia from Vladimir Putin just because it's going to cost, because the consequences, I have to be a fascist for a year?
I think the Russian people should be freeing themselves.
Okay,
you
but
don't need
assume that's not an
fascism
option.
for that. That's like saying that any war it's a fascist tactic. Was not a. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, just go with the analogy here. So the analogy is there's only one way out of Russia for the purpose of the analogy. I have to become a fascist leader for a year. That is the only way we're going to save Russia from fascist Vladimir Putin. would it be a good thing for me to be a fascist leader for a year if it got rid of Vladimir Putin? Like, would that fascism, my fascism, be a good thing in that case?
No,
Would it be better if Vladimir Putin stayed in power?
it's not a binary thing. Why is
This,
it
it's
you
just
or
a thought
him?
experiment. It's just a thought experiment. So the thought experiment is binary. If
Okay, well,
the
in that
two
case, if
options-
you're asking if slightly less fascism is better than lots of fascism, then okay, you got me.
okay, so you can see there's a reason if you had the belief that instituting slightly less fascism would save you from more fascism,
That doesn't
then you
make
can
fascism
believe.
moral.
I'm not saying it does. Remember, I agreed with you. Fascism is always immoral. I agree with
Okay,
you. That's
fine.
not the point. But you can see there are cases where instituting fascism is less immoral. It's a good thing to do because you're getting rid of a worse fascism thing. That's
Okay,
what
well
most
then,
fascists
by
believe.
your own logic and by your own assertions
Well,
here,
but
and
this
I'm
is
not saying this to necessarily agree with it, but then if you say that someone Antifa punching a fascist is using fascist tactics, surely you could argue from your own point of view then that that's
Yep.
worth it to get rid of that fascist.
right. So my argument here isn't what I believe. It's saying that most people who are fascist because they want to try to fix something in the government. They're saying there is something worse that we want to get rid of. The reason we're fascist, the reason we adhere to white nationalism or whatever, is because they think there's a worse problem that they're trying to fix. That's why they're advocating fascism. So just like you admitted, if you think there's a worse thing in government and fascism can fix it, even though fascism is immoral, it's good to justify it. So you're criticizing them for what you yourself admitted is a reasonable position. You think if they see there's this bigger problem, then instituting fascism would fix that bigger problem, then that's a good idea. And that's what they believe, and that's what you believe.
But
They and you believe.
But you're acting like these opinions on a level footing immediately.
Well,
Like you're saying,
the
like
fact-
that the way a fascist would fix the state is abhorrent.
So there's a difference between true beliefs and false beliefs, but you can't just assert that theirs is false and then say, "Oh, we're going to punch you in the face because your idea is false." Like, you need to show them that theirs is false. You can't just punch them in the face. Like,
You can
there'd be no
try. You
difference-
can try. You can try. Again,
Right.
like I say, that's
So-
always
so-
the first. That's always the first goal.
different road I'm going down here. So the idea is that you can't just determine that their idea is wrong and then punch them in the face, because that isn't a way to assess who's right and who's wrong. Obviously, you have an idea and they have an idea, and one of you is right, one of you is wrong. But to find out, punching the opposition in the face is not the correct way to find out. You need to, like, debate the issue, have conversations about the evidence and arguments, like, assess what's going on in the world, not just punch them in the face. Punching them in the face is no more justified for you than it is for them. The correct way to assess which idea is right or wrong is to discuss it, not punch in the face. It is not morally to punch someone in the face just because they have a different opinion. That's
Again, you're
wrong.
acting like this opinion is this just
Any opinion.
you know
Doesn't
what
matter
their
what the opinion
opinion. No,
is.
it does matter what their opinion is. It does matter because they're gonna take away these things. They're gonna, they're racist. They're gonna be anti. They're gonna put people in cages and deport people on boats, and that's part of fascism. Is in-group, out-group. It's rampant nationalism. And
it's a part of lots of ideologies of in-group, out-group. But they
okay,
who?
but it
Like,
is
is
one of,
that guy, Andy Ngo, is he going to do anything else? Is he ever going to have political power or ever going to cause any of that?
who knows?
So if it's a who knows, then it's okay to punch him in the face because it's a maybe. It might lead to that.
Right. Those views are the violence. That's what they want. They want that violence. That's
I don't know if most fascists do actually want the violence. I'd have to see a poll on that one. I don't believe that most of them actually do advocate for violence.
I strongly disagree that there's such a thing as benevolent fascism.
Benevolent? You mean non-violent?
But no, benevolent. You're arguing that there's good fascism. I can't.
Oh, gotcha.
There's no such thing as benevolent fascism.
Well, that was
anyone who's arguing for fascist principles. It always goes the same way. We know what they want. They tell us what they want. They're racists.
Are there non-violent fascists?
Probably. I don't know how they could be, because how would they implement any of their ideas?
Voting. So there are fascists who advocate for nationalism, like Poland and Hungary, for example, and they don't vote, like, militarily take over anything. They just vote into office. We want these policies. Here are the policies we advocate for. I mean, you would agree Poland and Hungary are in many cases
Okay,
fascist.
well, who else got voted in?
Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, I was going a bit further back than that. But
Well, Hitler didn't get voted in. Hitler
he sort of did. I
was-
know what you mean. Yeah, it was a bit
well,
of a scam.
the way he
yeah.
got in power was he shot the opposition on a stage and took over the stage. I don't think he really got voted in. But yeah, there are definitely fascists who do get voted in.
And
but
what's the
that's kind of
first thing
point.
they do? They break down the implements of democracy.
Well, that's, remember what your question was, is how would they get into power without military conquering? Like, they can get voted in. So people, nonviolent fascists, there can be nonviolent fascists who want certain political goals and then vote for people, and people vote for them to get those policies enacted. You don't have to be military or force people to do it to advocate for certain nationalistic policies. Like Poland and Hungary, they are, I think you would assume, label them as mostly fascist. They were voted into office. Like, is that immoral for those people to have that opinion and want their government to work that way, and for them to be voted into office?
Yes.
How so?
Because look at what they want. The things they want are immoral. Again, you're just saying like it's just an
what do they
opinion.
want?
It's not just an opinion.
What do
just
the
an opinion.
Polish and Hungary government want that's immoral?
They want to kick out all the immigrants. They want to ban abortion. They want to, put women back in the kitchen, and they want more hardcore police on the streets cracking down on dissidents, and it's fascism.
I don't remember those policies being in anywhere in Poland and Hungary's like manifesto for what they're planning to do. I mean, they're trying to stop immigration. They're not trying to eject the immigrants, as far as I know.
Right.
They did have a crackdown on abortion. I agree that is immoral. I don't see anything about women in the kitchen in any of their policies.
Granted, that was hyperbole. The point is that what they want is immoral. It's fascism. I feel like you're arguing for fascism, and it's,
well, yes, that's kind of the point of the debate.
Good point. And I don't see how it can ever be justified. And okay, the point is, someone like Antifa, like the Hungarian or the Polish Antifa, they'll be on the streets, they'll be handing out leaflets themselves. They'll be it's got a root, it's got a hold. This idea that there's a problem in the world and it's their fault, and we can fix it by pulling up the drawbridge and really cracking down on anyone who we decide is the enemy. And the point of anti-fascist people is to go, that's not the problem, they're the problem, or the government empowers the problem. And fascism is not a route out of that, it's a route back into it.
Well, remember, you already granted that there can be uses for fascism to solve a bigger fascism. So my point here is that if there are people who are just like you, who also agree that fascism can be used to solve a bigger problem, and they think there is a bigger problem, and that's why they want to use fascism, is to solve the bigger problem, then what you need to assess is, are they right or wrong, not say, stop being fascist. Because you admitted there can be good uses for fascism.
They're already, I didn't really admit that. You completely strong-armed me with a thought experiment.
You said that it's okay to use a smaller amount of fascism to stop a bigger amount of fascism, right?
I didn't. If I said, because you've left me no way out, I have to conclude that slightly less fascism is preferable to lots of fascism. That's not the same.
Right. So it's slightly less fascism is preferable to more fascism, right? That's what you said. That's not a straw man.
But then you're arguing now that the
what I'm arguing
incumbents are fascists.
What I'm arguing now is I'm saying that just like you believe that some fascism is not as bad as more fascism, so some fascism can be justified in some cases, they believe the same thing. They believe that some fascism can be justified in some cases to alleviate some greater ill. Now, they wouldn't agree that the greater ill is fascism, but they believe the same thing as you, that some fascism can be justified to alleviate some greater ill. So I'm making a comparison there. Do you see the comparison?
But this isn't the way the world is. There isn't a strong fascist Polish government and there's good fascists coming up to fight the bad fascist government.
I'm not. The comparison is, you admit that some fascism can be used to solve a bigger problem, and then the bigger problem in your case would be more fascism. You hate fascism, so you think if a lesser fascism could solve a bigger fascism, then the lesser fascism would be preferable. So you admit that fascism can be preferable in some cases. Now, other people, they don't agree with you that fascism is the problem. They agree there are other problems, and so they see fascism, the lesser fascism, is preferable to that other big problem that they see that isn't a bigger fascism from their perspective. So The other
Let's
people
put out
are
this
voting
fire
for.
with fire.
I'm trying to show you their ideology, not your ideology. So I understand your ideology is fascism is always bad. Fascism for you is the biggest problem. But you could justifiably use this problem, a smaller version of it, to solve a bigger problem. Other people have different problems. They don't see fascism as the problem. They see other things as bigger problems. And they want to use the smaller amount of fascism to solve those other bigger problems. Just like you said, you would use the smaller amount of fascism to solve the bigger fascist problem. So the reason they're advocating for fascism is the same way you would in that case, because they think there's a bigger problem that needs to be solved and they want to use this to solve it. And just like you would admit that's a good thing if the bigger problem is a bigger fascism, they could be right in whatever they think the bigger problem is. So what you need to show is that they're wrong and that the fascism they're advocating for is the bigger problem and not the thing they think is the bigger problem. Not just punch them in the face, because as you admitted,
punch them in the face isn't the first recourse. That's not what Antifa is, wandering around streets punching people in faces.
I agree. I'm not saying that you should ever, right. I totally agree that it's not the first thing, but I say it's not the second or third or fourth thing either. So I agree that you should first try to talk with them. Definitely. I think that's probably the only correct method, is to try to talk with them until literally Hitler starts to take over. Then okay, grab your guns and pitchforks. Happy to just support you there. But in the case of America, I don't think that's ever been justified. I don't think any of the punchings that Antifa did were ever justified in America just because Trump became president.
I do see what you're saying. But I still think that fascism is a weed that needs uprooting at the first sign of it, because it never leads anywhere good. And it's innately immoral. It's anti-human. It's all-controlling. It's racist. And it's the worst thing that could happen to a society.
I definitely don't think it's the worst thing that could happen to a society. I don't even think it's in the top 10,000 of the worst things that could happen to a society. But I think
just to jump in, sorry to interrupt there. Just jump in that in about 10 minutes time, we'll just bring this section of the debate to a close, and we'll go to the questions from the chat. There's like 1,000,001 questions from the chat.
I'm ready to go to the questions.
Yeah, we'll go to questions. That's cool.
Oh, you okay for that now?
Yep.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've both gone through pretty much our arguments.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, first of all, then I just want to say, we've just had a debate here on Antifa and fascism with two people who disagree, and as a moderator, I haven't had to say anything. I've just sat back and listened. So that is a massive, massive testimony to how you two conduct yourselves. And
Tom's a nice guy. I like Tom. And like I said, 9 times out of 10, I'm on Tom's side with this debate. And fucking the way you took down Hovind and you Catz. Oh, you've always had my respect.
Oh, thank you, mate.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. No,
Water. I can't do it.
I love it when he says that. No, but honestly, you two guys have really taken the spirit of the channel and how we do things here, and you've stuck with it. So just for what could have with other debaters have turned into an absolute shitstorm, you've kept that brilliant, and I've learned a lot. I've like I said at the beginning, all I've seen really about Antifa are the extreme clips that you get on YouTube and the news and stuff like that, and that's really where my impression of them has come from. So listening to two people actually properly talk about it and flesh it out has definitely been an education for me as well. So thank you. We'll go to the questions. I'll start with the super chat questions first, and then I'll go straight to the community poll. So let's start here. I'll start at the bottom. So Eric Hare, $5 says, how does anything in this debate put food on the table for ordinary people? So how does the Antifa movement, how does that affect I suppose what you're saying, how does it put food on the table for the normal person?
It doesn't. That's not its job. What?
Well, I don't quite understand the question. What does he mean?
Well, he's in the chat, and I'm sure he'll clarify that in a second. I'll look out for his response. Macabre Maleficer. It's a question for you, Mark. He says, can you explain how the dictatorship of the proletariat is any less stupid than an economically libertarian society? I'm not going to pretend I know what those big words mean.
not a communist, so no, I would say that's equally as bad.
Another one from Josh Brummett. Thank you very much. Says Antifa are the only people against free speech. Antifa in the US act as though Antifa in the US, and I know you said they're all different, act as though anyone on the right are fascist, but they are the ones that fight against free speech. Well, I know you've already kind of answered and said that there is no one Antifa, etc. But what's your opinion on that?
Well, I would say again, like, fascism's first job is stopping free speech. So if anything, Antifa's defending free speech.
By stopping their free speech.
Yes. They're allowed to say it. They're protected from saying it. They're allowed to say it. We're just allowed to say bullshit after. They're not protected from the consequences of the speech.
You're allowed to commit murder, but you're not allowed for the cops not to shoot you afterwards. So murder, totally okay.
That's not fair. Come on.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I when you say that, that's literally what I think of. Is like when you're saying they're allowed to speak, but then we're going to kill them afterwards. So it's like the Nazis thing. You can
We
do
haven't.
whatever you want. Go for
Antifa. Hang on. Let me bring up a report here from the Guardian. Anti-fascist linked to 0 murders in the US.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's most of the Antifa protests are completely nonviolent. The only ones that are violent are the ones where they do them right next to the alt-right protests, and those usually always get violent.
Opposed to 117 right-wing violence victims since 2010.
Right, but again, the question here is what you just said is that you're allowed to say what you want, but you're not allowed to get away from the consequences. It's exactly like the Nazis saying, yeah, you Jews can believe what you want, but you're not allowed to get away from the consequences. Like that's literally a contradiction what you're saying. Like if you're going to punish someone for doing something, then that's saying you're not allowed to do X. It's the self-contradiction to say you're allowed to do X.
But
you're
again,
not allowed
what's
to
the
not be
first
punished.
thing the fascists would do?
Well, that's an appeal to consequences fallacy. It's still, there's a contradiction in what you just said. That's what I'm focusing on.
Right.
If you saying they're allowed to do X, but they're not allowed to get away from the consequences is literally synonymous with saying you're not allowed to do X.
Well, that's why there's laws on hate speech.
Yes.
Okay. Next.
Because they're saying you're not allowed to do those things. That's why they're laws. You're not allowed
Right,
to.
but how is that not hate speech then?
What?
Well, if someone stands up and says, right, we're going to go kill all the Asian people in town, you're not allowed to say that.
That is hate
right?
speech. They'd be arrested for that.
Right. So why is it different to stand up and say, I hate every Asian person in town. We should kick them out of our town violently.
Well, that would also be hate speech.
Right. That's basically what fascists say a lot of the time, things like that.
Well, yeah, they can be arrested for that. That doesn't justify for you punching them. You should just record it and then give it to the police and they'd arrest
That's
them.
an incitement to violence.
Yes.
Right. Then
So give it to the
can't be
police.
the violence.
Don't punch them in the face. Give it to the police and they'll arrest them. But if they
Nah,
just
get
say,
'em
I
punched.
don't like Chinese people or whatever, that's not hate speech.
Get them punched, I say.
I think we're not going to agree on this, are we? Next one again from I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Macabre Malefica. Thank you again. Now, this is a question to both of you. So we'll start with you, Tjump, and then we'll go to Mark. Can either of you explain, without semantic reference to ideological dogmas, how Antifa differ from black or brown shirts in political intention? Again, I'm not very up on my I don't understand the reference to black or brown shirts, but or is that an American thing? Anyway, Tjump, that's off to you first.
Well, Antifa just has one thing. Like Mark mentioned in the opening, Antifa is just anti-fascism. It's kind of like atheism is anti-God. They don't really have a net policy beyond that. So it's not like they're inherently communist or whatever, or Marxist, even though many of them do subscribe to those things because communist Marxism and fascism have always been at odds. And so obviously if there's a group that hates fascism, lots of Marxists are going to be a part of it. But there isn't like a unified ideology behind anti-fascism, whereas I think like the brown shirts do have like a motivated ideology that they support beyond just fascism bad.
I echo those sentimonies.
So we agree on that one?
Yeah.
We agree to agree. I like it. Macabre Malefica again, thank you very much. Now, I assume this is to both of you to comment on. He's paraphrasing a bit of conversation before, where Tjump says violent suppression of opposition is fascism, and essentially, Mark, you say he's saying that you're saying not when you do it. What's your thought on that?
Fascism's more than that. It's not just violent suppression of opposition. That's the first thing they do. that's why Antifa will stand in their way. So they can't do that. And the point that Antifa is that fascism is always immoral and wrong.
So you're saying that fascism is violence and oppression plus dictatorial power, and Antifa is just the violence and oppression without the dictatorial
No, because
power.
Antifa wouldn't be there if the fascists weren't there. Like you just said, Antifa doesn't have a platform besides stopping fascism because it's fucking evil. That's it.
Right. That's not what I was asking. So I'm asking, like, the question was originally asking that you're doing the violence and oppression just like the fascists are doing, but they're doing something else that you're not doing, and that's the difference.
Well, again, Antifa is reactionary, so it's, you could say it's force rather than violence.
So another one from Macabre Loves here. Thank you very much. And I'm going to have to paraphrase this one of yours. I hope you understand why. So I'm just going to have to paraphrase it slightly. But he's basically saying he's not a fan of communists. Now I've seen that you mentioned it before, and that I've seen that in a couple of posts. And I'm completely like it's not my area at all. So what is the link between Antifa and communism? Are there any similarities? Are they completely different? Mark, do you want to explain how close or far apart you are?
Well, like I said in my opening, like anti-fascist action did come out of the German Communist Party, but it was not a communist-owned thing. Like Tom said, it's a loose-knit collection of people who are anti-fascist, and a lot of those happen to be communist because communism and fascism, as Tom said, in theory opposed. So that's why there's a lot of communists and socialists in the anti-fascist movement. Yeah.
So the movement isn't a communist movement, but it does attract communists, like you might say. So
yes.
Like, yeah, okay.
It's like the same thing between atheism and liberalism. Atheism rejects religion and advocates for women's rights. And so a lot of the people who also advocate for women's rights, like liberals, are attracted to things like atheism. So it's the same kind of thing. Antifa doesn't say anything. It doesn't have any political motives other than no fascism. That's its only ideology. Like atheism is just no God. And there are lots of other kinds of groups that also happen to I agree with that in addition to that one principle.
Yeah.
Another super chat again from Macabre Melissa, and I thank you so much. You've done that a lot tonight. I appreciate that. Thank you. He disagrees with what you said. He says Antifa are a self-professed anarcho-communist organisation.
Well, then he's wrong.
I think that's
who?
Agreeing to.
Who said that?
Yeah, there's no self-professing. Yeah.
Well, the problem is like when religious people say that Marx is a atheist doctrine, like,
yeah,
where did Marx get this authority to rule all of atheism? Anyone who says, well, we're the authority on Antifa, like, who gave them that authority?
Exactly.
Are they like heroes of Antifa who everyone look up to? Like, I don't know of any real Antifa authorities to really represent the entire movement.
So
yeah,
there's no
you're
sort
absolutely right, Tom.
Top-down structure to it and
nothing like
guidelines.
That. No. That's part of the problem.
If it was a bit more organised, that's what you...
Well, it makes it easier to strawman because there is no, like Tom said.
This one Antifa said this, therefore all Antifa say this.
Yeah, exactly. So for someone to say it's a self-professed, to be honest as well, I think anarcho-communism is an oxymoron in itself. So I wouldn't go for that anyway.
Right, so there's still loads of questions to go. One from Web Bard. This is to you, Tjump. Is inciting a riot a crime? You could say it's an opinion, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's a crime. I'm pretty sure it qualifies as hate speech.
Yep. Mark, do you want to weigh in on that one?
I would. Yeah, I suppose it is a crime inciting a riot. Yeah.
Even if you're Antifa inciting a riot against fascists.
Again, Antifa don't really do the inciting.
I mean, the report from the Obama administration disagrees.
Obama says a lot of things. Does his killing on a Tuesday. So cool.
Wade Watts makes a point. He says hate does not beat hate. It just breeds more hate. What do you think about that?
not technically true given history, but his sentiment is correct. You shouldn't use hate to beat hate, but mass murdering lots of people who hate you definitely ends their hate.
Yeah, peaceful appeasement didn't really work out too well in the 30s.
So, sorry, go on.
That's it.
So if just by the way, if anyone, I've just noticed myself on the stream, it looks as if I'm just glancing in the corner of my room, not paying attention to anything. It's because my other monitor's way far from my camera. So if at any point it looks like I'm not paying attention, I am fully focusing, but just on my other monitor. Crafty Keeler, this is to Tjump. Okay, she says there is a massive difference between racism and fascism. Racism is having an opinion, and fascism is acting and organising on those extreme views. Do you not believe it would be better to challenge the extremist views, which are very destructive, whether physically violent or psychologically violent, to prevent the psychological attacks from becoming physical?
Fascism isn't acting on anything. Fascism is a political position, so it doesn't. A fascist government would act on it, but fascism isn't acting on it. So fascism is an opinion, just like racism is an opinion. You can have fascists who are like closet fascists who don't ever tell anybody without them ever acting on it. So it doesn't, they wouldn't somehow be fascist just because that's the political position they advocate for. So it doesn't make sense to say that they're not both opinions, but there's obviously a difference between a fascist government and just a racist opinion, but a racist government would also be acting on it too. So I don't really understand the analogy there.
Mark, is there anything you want to weigh in on that?
No, I would agree.
I think the next one's for you, Mark, from Crowbar Viking, who says, how does punching alt-right people make them turn away from extremism and thus is okay? But punching Muslims who do not condemn 9/11 makes them become radical extremists and thus not okay.
What?
Yeah, I don't think we've touched on...
He says punching makes it worse. So if you punch a Nazi, that only gives them more attention and causing more people to become Nazis. Therefore, it's probably a good idea not to punch them. Just like if you punch a Muslim, that more people start to hate you and your country for being violent against Muslims. And so your actions are directly counterproductive to your cause in that case.
I would like to think that any sane person who was like, oh, I wonder why that guy got punched, and then looked at what he was saying or she and doing and acting on, would go, oh yeah, give him a punch.
Okay. Macabre Maleficent again. This is to you, Mark. Antifa identify any and all political proponents slightly right of Stalin as fascist. By this edict, they justify violence in the pursuit of political power. How does this not meet the definition of terrorism? And what tactics would you employ to justify that terrorism?
Antifa does not seek political power, so it doesn't matter.
It's not never.
I mean,
are there political parties out there that like align themselves with that Antifa? Is there any kind of political element, or is it just not?
There's some that are more. I mean, I can only speak for Britain, but like the SWP has always been generally an ally, but it's again they don't control it. It's just their members sometimes overlap.
Well, I think there's a really important point in the question, which is how do you really determine if someone is or isn't fascist? And because there are definitely people in the fascist movement who just label anybody they don't like as fascist. And so unless you have some kind of formalized structure to say this person is fascist, this person isn't, then the label fascism can just have everyone go against you, even if you're not.
Yeah, there is it's tricky. That's true. That is, yeah, mistakes. Yeah, that can happen. It's a bit, I don't know how to, we all know what fascism is when we see it. But because it is a loose, mixture of people, some people have different ideas of what that is than others. That's true. But at the core, fascism is what we all know. We know fascism when you see it, like modern art.
Where was I? Beta Decay says fascism is wrong, and I will violently suppress you if you disagree. He says that that's a hypocritical viewpoint. I think that one's aimed at you, Mark. What do you think?
Again, fascism is the violence, where Antifa is opposing what they would want to do. That's all I can say on it, really.
Yeah,
Well, it's the same question though. I think it was the same first question, same as the first question.
it was,
He's saying that Antifa is, it does the same violence, but it's not doing the other stuff that fascism is doing, and that's the difference, I think.
Yeah, and if we let them just get on with it, and we're like, yeah, fair enough, you guys go. If it takes, they can, because they're going to be the propaganda they use, the way they turn young people against minorities and things like that, and try and blame them. You can go, your life's shit, and it's because of them. Well, we just let that happen and just let it go, and then it pulls the whole discourse to the right. So I say, no, that's what we're there for. That's what Antifa's there for. You oppose whenever you see. And again, like, the first recourse is not to punch them in the face.
No. This one from Asbjorn says, Tjump, he thinks you're slightly confusing fascism with totalitarianism and authoritarianism. What do you think? Do you think you were, or do you think you've got those?
Well, again, I was just reading the definition off of the internet. So if you just Google the definition, that was the one I was reading. So it couldn't be me being the one who's confused there. It'd have to be all of the sources on the website that use those definitions.
Mm-hmm. Tjump, another one to you from Webard. Not sure what part of the debate this was left at, but he says, what is the better choice, punching one Nazi or locking children in cages?
Yeah, obviously punching one Nazi is better than locking children in cages, but I don't see that punching one Nazi is somehow going to stop a government policy. I think it's more likely to actually cause it to happen.
Okay, so we have got quite a lot. I'm just trying to get everybody in. Adiohead says, this is one for you, Mark. Do you think it's okay to breed, exploit, and kill animals? Are you vegetarian? Well, you don't have to tell us if you're vegetarian.
I am vegetarian, yeah.
Yeah. So would you say the same principles apply then?
To a degree. I mean, it's a weird equivalency, I think, but yeah, I don't think that's okay either. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kiri Max says, can either guest cite any further reading or recommend any sources, or is this mainly a chat about opinions that have been built up during recent events?
Sources for what? Like, this isn't really a academic debate. Like, I don't think we disagree on the facts.
Yeah, like I said, if this was an academic and, start things debate, when I saw I was against Tom, I would have backed out in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Right, I think, let me just refresh.
Hang on, though. There is a book by, I think it's Mark Bray, that's pretty good. Mark Bray's written a book called Antifa. What's it called? I've lost his thing. Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. But again, that's not like the authority. That's just a bloke who's written a book.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could give you some economic reading on what is the correct economic policy and free speech and what public discourse and why it's important. Maybe.
And again, like I don't speak for Antifa. Like, I don't want anyone to think I don't speak for Antifa. This is just my opinion. Like, I don't want anyone going like, that guy, that guy didn't know shit. Like, maybe I don't. That's very possible.
We're going to elect Mark the king of Antifa.
Okay. Crowning the biggest ceremony at the end of the show. Just quick, we've got a couple more actually just come in when I've refreshed the page. First one from Adiohead. Why don't Antifa go and fight for women and LGBTQ people in the Middle East where they are oppressed?
Well, because they'd be killed, I think, is one reason. Also, it costs lots of money to fly there. And you're not going to really have a lot of people go at the same time. That'd be kind of rough. There's lots of reasons why they can't do that. But there are many I know who would.
Thanks,
and
Tom.
do advocate for it.
Yeah, see? Tom gets it.
And another one for you, Mark, from Macabre Maleficent, who says, how does attempting to affect political change not meet the criteria of exercising political power? Your dismissal of my question violates the definition of terrorism, which is to affect political change.
I mean, again, lots of things the war in Iraq was terrorism. It's if you want to go by a very strict to put political change, then that's again one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. It's not a terrorist organization. There's no plots or plans. There's no, you know what I mean? It's not like that. It's turn up where the fascists are. That's it. Like, again, zero people killed by Antifa, as opposed to what did that stat say? Oh shit, the bed, I've lost it.
Shit, the bed, I love that term.
Yeah, actually, the majority of terroristic violence in the U.S. is right wing, so that is definitely true, with the exclusion of 9/11.
Yeah.
Right. Well, guys, it looks like we've caught up with all the questions on the board, all the questions in the chat. I'll just see if anyone tags in any more questions just in the next minute. I know we could go on for ages, but maybe I'll do 2 more questions and then we'll call it a day. Seek Truth, Speak Truth has a premiere coming out, and he told me it was going to be about 9 o'clock, so I did say I'd shout that out and see if I could advertise that for him before 9. So we'll be done in about the next 4 or 5 minutes. But let's have a look at
who is that?
Seek Truth, Speak Truth. He's a friend of the channel.
I've seen that name before. Yeah.
Yeah, he's I've interviewed him a couple of times. He's been on here just for a chat once, and he's excellent. And he was a flat earther. He's not anymore, and he takes a lot of stick.
Is it that guy?
Yeah, he's got a premiere coming up at 9. So let's have a look. Any questions? Just tag me in from now, and I'm looking. Rune Thornton says Antifa used to be AFA. Now I don't know who AFA were. Who were AFA?
And that's just anti-fascist action.
All right. So okay. 82 Productions apparently has asked a question. Okay. If fascism is so from 82 Productions, if fascism is violence and Antifa is anti-fascism, i.e. against violence, then why the adherence to violent actions? Wouldn't pacifism be more appropriate?
If it worked, again, that's the first cause.
Okay, let's see if we've got any. Feel free as well, Tjump. If a question's not for you, feel free to jump in and. Right. Also, on Bacon Earth just reposted that. Thank you very much. Yes, I think we're pretty much done with the questions there, guys. I just want to thank you so much, honestly, because this debate could have gone one of a million ways. If it hadn't been you two having this debate, I could have had an absolute nightmare trying to moderate this. And as it happens, I've sat back, said nothing, and you've just reined yourselves in. So I really, really appreciate both of you coming on. I'd have any of you back here at any time to debate anything. So if you ever
I want to say, thanks, Catz, and thanks, Tom, as well. Like this made my first debate, and you give me stuff I can look at and think about for future as well. And I still think you're a top chap.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Dirty anarcho-communist liberal dim soy boy. Yeah.
Well, you'd be great. I'm going to say goodbye to you guys off air. I'm going to wish Creaky a happy birthday. I'm going to thank you everybody in the chat who's been asking questions and watching. So thank you very much. And so I'll be back tomorrow with a Conspiracy Cats video. It's in the bag. It's uploading as we speak. Have you got anything you want to shell out, Tjump? Your channel is linked in the description, so anyone who wants to see more of Tjump, I do like watching his debates and his videos. They are in the description. Is there anything you want to shell out that you've got coming up soon, Tjump?
I have no idea. I just put all my stuff in my calendar and don't remember it till the day of. So, but I would like to say happy birthday to Creaky. Happy 732nd birthday. Congratulations.
But yeah, she's getting not quite as youthful as me, is he? Mark, I know you haven't got a YouTube channel or anything like that to show, but is there anything you want to shill out? Anything you want to say before we? I'll give you the last word and then I'll end the stream.
The last word. It's been
as long as it ends in bye, then I'll end the stream.
I'm a fan of yours, Catz. I'm a fan of yours, Tjump. It's been a surreal pleasure being here, and make sure you watch Cat's video tomorrow. I always watch him. Doesn't make him a communist.